Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome. I'm Bettina Lawton. I'm the host of Inside Scoop, Virginia. And tonight we are talking with Senator Dave Marsden and Delegate Mark Keam. This is kind of our wrap-up show for the General Assembly. Last time we were here, we had gone through crossover. We had some stuff pending, but it is now done and everyone is back home. There's going to be a veto session, I believe, in April. But otherwise, we pretty much are set on what we've got right now. We had a lot of major things happen right in the last week of the session. We're going to be talking about those. So let me introduce my guests because I'm very pleased to have Senator Dave Marsden for his inaugural appearance on the show with me anyway. He is the senator from the 37th District in Fairfax. He represents a portion of Fairfax County. Before that, he was in the Virginia House of Delegates. And before that, he spent 17 years as head of the Fairfax County Juvenile Detention Center until 1999. He was appointed by Republican Governor Jim Gilmore as the chief deputy and then the acting director of the Virginia Department of Juvenile Justice. And he stayed in that position for several months into Governor Mark Warner's term. He is a local guy, graduated from Woodson High School and also from Randolph-Macon College. So David, welcome to the show. I'm glad that you could make it tonight.
Thank you, Bettina. It's good to be here.
Now we also have Mark Keam on the show. This is not his inaugural appearance. He's been here a couple times before. He represents the 35th District in the House of Delegates, which includes portions of Fairfax County and the town of Vienna. He has a political science degree from the University of California at Irvine and a law degree from Hastings College of Law. He previously was Senator Dick Durbin's chief counsel on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he is now with Verizon Communications when he is not busy being a delegate. So I want to welcome you back, Mark, and thanks for coming.
Thank you, Bettina.
And I want to talk to you guys first just on something that happened federally on Friday, which was the sequester. You guys just finished this whole big budget negotiation in the Virginia State House. Is the federal sequester going to cause you all to have to go back down and make changes, or is it not going to really affect the budget itself?
Well, we certainly hope not. And the reason is that, as we all know, living in Northern Virginia here, even though the sequester deadline has come and gone, we haven't quite seen the impacts yet. There may be furloughs coming, and I'm very worried about that, considering how many federal employees we have. There may be possible cuts to contracts, especially at the Department of Defense, in which case we're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs at risk. But the good news for now is that the status quo has been achieved. And in Virginia, one of the things that we've done in a prudent, fiscally conservative, prudent way was last year and the year before, in anticipation of any kind of a problem at the federal level, we put away more money in the rainy day fund. So instead of having a $300 million pot, we now have, I believe, about an $800 million pot, just to make sure that the state doesn't have to have any problems in case the federal government doesn't match.
Okay.
Yeah, of course it is going to roll out somewhat slowly, and I do federal contracting work, and the word we've gotten from a couple of the agencies that we've dealt with at this point is that the contracts that were issued in 2012 are going to be honored. I think it's what's happening in 2013. Contracts that, there may be budgetary adjustments to those, but the sequester's been an interesting exercise. It seemed like nobody was scrambling too hard to stop it, because I think politically it worked for both sides of the aisle. Everybody can get the cuts that we need, blame the other side. And at the end of the day, I think that they will make some adjustments so that the Defense Department, for instance, can make adjustments so that they'll have flexibility in how they exercise these cuts, carry them out. And so I think for the rest of the country, I don't think it's going to create any problems. Stock market's looking strong, so yeah. I think we move on. And the next deadline coming up is I think on the 27th is the continuing resolution to keep the government going, and I'm very optimistic about that.
Well, I would hope so. I mean, that would be not a great thing to suddenly have the whole thing go down at the end of the month. Although I don't think the economy can continue to go in these little 3-month segments that we've been doing. We do need to get some resolution. And I did see the various folks saying, well, Washington really needs to be like Richmond. In Richmond, we get it done, and held you guys up as the example for the ability to compromise, which we will talk about, because I know, Mark, you certainly got criticized fairly strongly several weeks ago, and things hopefully worked out all right. But the first thing I wanted to mention, I wanted to talk about in terms of topics, and Dave, I particularly wanted to talk with you about it, is this texting while driving bill that I saw that got passed. And I had really some questions about what that's going to do. You're a juvenile justice guy. Young kids text all the time. But that seems to me to be like an enforcement quagmire. How does a cop know if you're texting? Because I can still talk on my cell phone. So if I'm looking down, how do you know as a police officer that I'm not just putting in somebody's phone number?
Well, I think it is, we're trying to do this in increments and in installments to make this feasible to some of the more conservative members of the legislature. But let's face it, we all know where we're going to end up, which with hands-free, where you're not going to be able to manipulate your phone by hand. If you're texting or dialing a number or whatever, eventually we're going to have laws in Virginia that say you just can't do that. There's other technology available, that you can do voice commands and do what you need to do and keep your hands on the steering wheel. I think it's where we're headed, and it's just awkward getting to that stage because we're putting it in increments, and it's an enforcement nightmare for the police.
Well, and perhaps this is one of those differences between Northern Virginia and the rest of it, but since you have to use hands-free in Washington, D.C. and in Maryland, a lot of people up in this area already have that technology, and it's built into a lot of the GPS devices these days. I don't know if the problem in getting us there, because that is kind of the rational way to go, is whether the rest of the state isn't using it as much or what. It just doesn't strike me as such a big deal. Is this another liberty? Is this my liberty, like having to wear my seatbelt?
You just said the magic word. It's the whole nanny state thing of people trying to tell you what to do, and that resonates very very large in many parts of rural Virginia, and they just want to move slowly, and I understand that. But it's a safety issue. It is so dangerous to text and drive, dial telephone numbers, look at your emails. It's something that we've got to do away with. We're getting there slowly, but in the meantime, we seem to create as many problems as we solve.
Well, and I sort of wonder the other question, because this happened to a friend of mine, actually. He was out partying way too much one night, and he pulled over to the side of the road, and he turned the car off. And fortunately, the keys fell out of the ignition. And the police officer who stopped told him that had the keys been in the ignition, he still could have been charged with driving under the influence. So if I'm stopped at a stop sign, I'm not driving, or I'm stopped at a light, am I still not supposed to be looking at my phone? Because that's certainly when I look at my phone, is when I'm stopped.
You are operating a motor vehicle, and you should not be
looking at my phone,
texting and looking at your telephone. And,
okay. So it's broader. It's not while driving. It's while operating the vehicle.
While operating a motor vehicle, and that I believe is the definition in the Virginia Code.
Okay. Now let me ask you another question, which I of course immediately thought of because I'm a lawyer. And that is, so somebody stops me. How does the police officer prove I was looking down and texting? I mean, can I be forced to give him my phone, or do you have to go get a warrant?
I don't know the definitive answer to that question, but I believe that we still have the right in this country not to incriminate ourselves, okay, and to turn over that telephone to the police officer. But I don't think that you would have to do that. And I think if it was a question of there was a felony where there was a hit and run, or there was a vehicular homicide or something like that, certainly they could subpoena your phone records at that point in time for something serious, but I don't think we're going to probably get into that on traffic stops.
Okay. And this applies to everybody who's driving or operating a vehicle, commercial vehicles, private vehicles, everything is covered.
I think there are some exclusions put in for commercial operators who have machines that they report into the home office with, and there's certain things. I know several years ago that was put into one of the first texting bills that was passed. So I'm not sure of the current status on that, but we're always trying to look after not inhibiting business people and the legitimate transactions that they're involved with.
Well, and of course, when you just did that I thought to myself, that's what the police officers do. They've got these big screens so presumably there's probably somewhere in that little tiny print, there's the exemption for the police officers to continue to use their desk dashboard kind of computer things while they're doing their job. So we shall see. I want to talk about the governor's education reform package, because I think both of you have mentioned it in your letters to your constituents. I mean, the good side was that the teachers got a 2% raise. And that's instructional people. So it doesn't cover everybody in the schools. It only is the actual teacher in the classroom. It doesn't cover like social workers or counselors or any of those people. Is that right?
That's right. That was in the budget. And one of the reasons why that provision, the pay raise, was included was because it was conditioned on some major reforms that the governor also asked for as well. And I ended up having to support that bill because the teachers were just so desperate for a raise. We haven't had one in a long time, and our national average salary has dropped below the national average. And so, especially in Northern Virginia with our cost of competing, we really wanted to make sure that our teachers were being paid at the professional level that they should have been. But the governor had, over the last 2-3 years, had proposed a number of different initiatives, and I serve on the House Education Committee and on the subcommittee where most of these bills came through. So I had a chance to work on these bills from the get-go. And by and large, I agree with a lot of the ideas, which is our schools may be great, and we're certainly proud of our schools, especially in Northern Virginia, but we can certainly improve more. And if there are problems where, for example, you have a teacher who's just not performing at the rate that he or she should be, but we want to find a way to maybe move that person out of the teaching role to another role or some other way. But our system as it was a little bit tougher to make sure that the bad apples within the system were gotten rid of, and at the same time promoting the good teachers. And so we did take a look at some really hard reforms, and we looked at lessons from across the country. As you know, school reform ideas have been around for quite a lot recently. And what we decided to do this year was that all of our teachers, representatives, sat at the table with the governor's staff and a lot of us in the room, and we came to a great compromise, which was that we would allow for teachers to have a longer lead time to be evaluated and to receive, well, technically it's not tenure, but a continuing contract. In return, we will find a way to streamline the process of getting rid of a teacher that's just not performing, and also toughening the standards by which the teacher is graded and performs. So that package, as a substantive matter, was good and bad, but it was tied to a 2% pay increase. So we had to accept both of them, and as a result, the teachers got their package.
Okay. Well, we're going to pick that up when we come back from our break and talk some more about the education package and what happened to the teachers. And then we're going to go on and talk about the infamous transportation bill. So stay with us. We'll be back.
There's more than just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library.
Excuse me. There's more than just books at the library.
Il n'y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
A lot of great books here today. You know there's more than just books at the library.
I know.
There's more than just books at the library.
I don't want to be hooked to a machine.
I want all the medical treatment available to me.
I wouldn't want my family to have to make this decision.
My doctor knows what's best for me.
An advance directive is your life on your terms. Talk with your family. Decide what's right for you. Then put it in writing.
Documenting my wishes today means my family won't have to make heart-wrenching decisions later.
To learn more, visit www.putitinwriting.org.
1,200 American youth run away from their homes every day. The National Runaway Switchboard is here to help. 1-800-RUNAWAY. If you are a runaway, thinking about running away from home, or a parent or guardian concerned about issues facing your child, Call us 24 hours a day. 1-800-RUNAWAY. In times of crisis, hope is just a phone call away. 1-800.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop, Virginia Politics. I'm Bettina Lawton, your host. I want to give our local call-in number if you want to call in and ask a question of Senator Marsden or Delegate Keam. It's 571-749-1166. Now, when we left, we were talking about the education reform package, and we had talked about the 2% increase for the teachers. My understanding is it's contingent on the local governments, in our case Fairfax County, coming up with a matching amount of money, and that this is around $30 million or so for Fairfax. That's a lot of extra money.
Well, traditionally, through the composite index by which jurisdictions are given state aid, Fairfax County traditionally receives about 25% of its school budget, baseline standards of quality school budget, and then the locality, Fairfax, has to pay 75%. Now that's exactly the reverse in certain rural and less affluent counties where they receive 75% of their school funding from the state and only pay 25% locally. In Fairfax County, because of the many extra things that we do, we actually pay about 92% of all educational costs in Fairfax County. So it's significant when the state is asking the county to pony up even more. It's a real burden on this county because schools are our biggest expense.
Well, and that is one of the comments that got made, and we'll talk about it a little more on the transportation bill, of how much money in Northern Virginia we ship down to Richmond that then gets spread out to the rest of the state that we never get back again. Now we're going to be taxing ourselves even more for transportation. But we're not there yet. Let me not switch us off of that, because I did want to talk to you about this grading system. I saw there was a bill that, and there's a lot of criticism these days about how we keep testing our kids, and now we're going to apparently test our schools in some different fashion, because we already assess our schools, and now there's this A through F grading system. Why is that necessary? What's that all about?
Well, that's right, and that was one of the governor's initiatives, and I strongly oppose that from the beginning of the announcement all the way through. And to his credit, the reason why he wanted to do this, and I want to make it clear and be fair on the other side, schools are already graded. So every single school in Virginia already has a standard that says they're passing, passing with flying colors, just barely passing, they're failing, and definitely we have some problems. We have about 4 schools in the entire state that has a failing grade right now. What the governor and his staff wanted to do was, instead of having all these complicated assessments that say this score means what, they wanted to go with a simple A through F, something that all of us understand. And so he wanted to say some schools are worth A, some schools are worth B, all the way down to Fs. And for me, the gut reaction, beyond policy, beyond politics, the gut reaction was, why do we want to stigmatize our schools? Why do we want to send our kids to a school that's got a brand on top of that? Now, in Northern Virginia, in our area here, most of our schools, if not all of our schools, will rank A's. But there are some schools like in Alexandria that are failing. So do we really want to have our students and our neighbors talking about, oh, he or she goes to a failing school and he or she goes to an A school? The school you go to has nothing to do with that student's performance and the student's ability as a merit. So I didn't want to stigmatize that student for the rest of his or her life by having a big scarlet letter A or an F next to the school that he or she went to.
Yeah, Mark's right, and while I understand and appreciate the need to simplify things for people, what it's done is simplify a very complicated process. And we have, I think, 4 or 6, somewhere like that, some number like that of schools that are in the F rating, and they've been there consistently over the years, which tells you something. They've done all kinds of interventions. These are communities that are struggling. These aren't just schools or school systems that are struggling. These are folks who are, caught in poverty. caught in neighborhoods that are somewhat dysfunctional, aren't working well. And that's where we need to put our efforts into fixing these communities, because that's the underlying problem. The school system or the school that's failing is usually just a symptom of that dysfunction, especially if it's year in and year out that you're seeing that school show up on the list of schools that are failing.
And that's right. And the reality is everybody already knows whether a school is good or not. You ask any realtor, you ask any neighborhood, everybody out there already knows what schools are good and what's not. You have magazines like U.S. News and World Report and many other publications that grade in their own way, you know, whether it's a top school or a bottom school. The difference here is, and by the way, this did become law, so it will become law as of July 1st. The difference here is that this is the government assessing a governmental program for the first time. So unlike, say, a private sector newspaper or a realtor or somebody else saying, oh, this is a really good school, and that's why the property next to it is doing well, this is the government saying, you know what, we just told ourselves that we have an A school here, but we also told ourselves we have an F school. And the real concern for me was thinking about the kids, thinking about the students. Somebody who graduates at the bottom of his or her class in an A school will most likely be treated better by a college admissions person or by the community around them than somebody who graduates valedictorian in an F school. So I think we're creating a different class of students based on the fact that they went to a school that they might not have had any control over where they grew up.
So if my school is an F school, I'm in one of those handful that are F schools, does this law give me a right to demand that my child be relocated to a better school, or am I simply stuck?
No, it wouldn't. And that's actually something that was addressed in another bill, which is also just as controversial. The governor had a bill called the Opportunity Education Institution. And the idea there was, if you have a school that's failing, constantly failing over and over, and with all the community input, with all the professional help, the school just doesn't get back on its feet, that the government, the state itself, will now take over that school, take it away from the local community, and then, I mean, literally turn it into something that's better. And so the governor came up with this plan, which I believe, and I think a lot of lawyers believe, was unconstitutional. In fact, when the governor put that bill in, he also put along with the bill, and this is a little bit more inside baseball as how Richmond works, but next to the regular bill that would have changed this process, he also put in another bill that would have changed the Constitution as well to make this bill constitutional. Well, guess what? Both the House and the Senate killed the constitutional amendment, which meant that the constitutional aspect of it has fallen through. And so even though we have a bill that passed, if it doesn't pass constitutional muster, it won't work. But the simple version of that was that solved the problem of, if you have a student that's going to a failing school, what happens to that? Instead of taking that student out of there, we just shut down the school and create a whole new school based on this new program.
Yeah. And is there some program that the state is going to be subscribing to? Why should I, as a parent, for example, in Alexandria, have any confidence at all that somebody in Richmond is going to know how to fix my school when the local people haven't been able to do it?
Well, that's the rub here, is that the State Board of Education has no experience in directly running schools. And so what I think a number of people are concerned about is that this is a backdoor way of getting more charter schools into Virginia. Mm-hmm. And now there are some charter schools that do very well. There are other charter schools that don't do as well as public schools. It's kind of a mixed bag, if you will, of results from charter schools. And but again, just coming back to the point I made a few moments ago, is that the real issue here is the communities these schools are reflective of, and not the schools themselves. And bringing in a charter school is not going to fix a community that's struggling with social problems and dysfunction. We've got to get to the core of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's interesting that in our government that is controlled by the Republicans, who are always saying, oh, we want less government, we've pretty much got a new government entity now that's going to be in charge of running schools. So instead of, as you would suggest, Dave, taking the money, investing it in communities around those schools, we're just going to have another government bureaucracy with no history.
Well, that's true, but the thing that's rubs me a little bit the wrong way is that in addition to maintaining a system that may or may not be broken, but instead of focusing on fixing the public education process, we constantly look for alternatives, whether it's charter schools, virtual schools, private schools, home schools. We're constantly struggling to come up with a better version of what's already been working. And I think one of the biggest differences between the two parties, just from a surface, is that I think Democrats are still looking to fix the system as is, do the best we can with the taxpayer funding to make sure that the schools at every level is fixed, as opposed to experimenting with all these different innovations. I mean, I'm all for innovations, but let's make sure we have the program first before we think about adding more to that.
Right. Well, we'll have to see how that works. I think that's going to be a kind of an interesting endeavor with these schools. Let's talk transportation, because it's a big issue. And there were a lot of people who said we have to do this. We dropped from number 1 for business in the CNBC poll down to number 3. They cited transportation, our failure to address transportation as an issue. We went from, I think, number 10 to number 33 on the quality of our infrastructure and transportation in that same kind of survey. So it's clearly a problem. We haven't been able to address it, but we've got this bill. It's massive. It does all kinds of different things. And there seems to be a lot of dispute about whether or not it was a good thing to do. And I know early on, Mark, I ran into you several weeks ago at something, and you had just taken a boatload of criticism for voting to let it proceed in the House of Delegates. And as you said to me at the time, we have to keep moving. This isn't what we're going to end up with, but we need to keep the process moving. So we got there. Dave, you and I talked about this yesterday. There is all of this stuff out on YouTube about the Senate folks saying, never, never, we're never going to do this. And, well, we've done this. So let's talk about what we did. In this morning's Washington Post, it talks about the roads deal and says that it's a major victory for Governor McDonnell. Of course, apparently he has really alienated his base of conservatives because of the taxes. But is this a good thing for him, particularly since everybody thinks he's going to try and run for federal office?
I think at the end of the day, anytime you get something important done, regardless of the people who are the naysayers and what have you, it's good. This was a bill. It wasn't good for Republicans. It wasn't good for Democrats. It was good for Virginians. Winston Churchill, wasn't it Winston Churchill that said, this is the worst transportation bill ever except for all the others?
Right.
Exactly. And that's what we have here. There's a lot in this bill to dislike. If you're a Democrat, there's things in the bill to dislike if you're a Republican. Usually that's a sign of a good compromise, is nobody's truly happy with it. But we have money in there, both on a statewide basis for maintenance and for construction, and locally for construction projects that we can use regionally to solve some of our problems. This is a good thing. It will create jobs. It will inspire confidence in Virginia as the place to do business. It will attract businesses from around the country. And this was an important message to send. And I appreciate the governor getting this thing started. And while Mark was moving the bill along, the politics in the Senate had me in the Transportation Committee moving to pass the governor's bill by for the year, because I thought there were 7 better ones that we could go with. So we had some different vehicles in the Senate to work with, but the politics of the House and the Senate are sometimes different. But we all got to the same place, and we were all able to vote for a bill that is going to make a huge difference.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I would say that, first of all, we got to give credit where it's due. And the governor, to his credit, started the conversation. And he could have used any other issue in his last year in office. But the fact that he opened the door, especially as a Republican talking about tax increases, that really got the door open. So I think that's where we started the conversation.
Well, someone said to me it's kind of like Nixon going to China. You needed the Republican governor to start it. So when we come back, we're going to continue talking about transportation. So stay with us.
This year, 28,000 Americans will be diagnosed with oral cancer. Every year, 7,000 Americans die of oral cancer.
I'm Eva Cohen, and I'm an oral cancer survivor. I didn't fit the profile. I didn't smoke or drink. I had no family history of cancer, no family history of cancer. I was 31 years old. 31 years old. I went to see my dentist about a sore in my mouth that wouldn't heal. It was oral cancer. I had to have a radical neck dissection and a portion of my tongue reconstructed. I didn't know if I was going to live or die.
I'm Surgeon General Richard Carmona. The survival rate for oral cancer is only 50%. Oral cancer can happen to anyone. If you have a sore or lesion in your mouth that doesn't heal within 2 weeks, see your dentist. Early detection is the key.
Early detection saves lives. I know.
1 in 8 Americans goes hungry. One idea helped change that. A community started a garden that blossomed into farmers markets. 1 in 6 children lives in poverty. One group of women found an answer by opening a daycare center that their neighbors could afford. Today, 36 million Americans live in poverty, but one by one, people are helping themselves and each other to change the picture of poverty to one of hope. For easy ways you can help, visit povertyusa.org.
2 words for you. Pop quiz. Ready? Name any funny movie. A drama. Name a mystery. And one more thing. Name the movie your kids saw today in science class.
Know what really matters. Know about your kid's school. And know about your kid. Find out 100 ways to know more.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Bettina Lawton. This is Inside Scoop Productions, Virginia Politics. Let me give you the local number in case you want to call in again. It's 571-749-1166. I'm here tonight with Senator Dave Marsden and Delegate Mark Keam, and we are talking transportation. So there were lots of proposals going on. So Mark, can you give us sort of the big overview, what actually happened here?
Well, sure. There's an old saying in law school, and I'm sure in Washington as well, that says that there are 2 things that you never want to see being made, laws and sausages. And I think we made a lot of sausage this session. And on the transportation bill, what happened, and the reason why the conversation got started with the governor was he actually, for the first time in my memory, got up and said, we need to raise taxes in order for us to have a transportation solution. And when he opened that door, Republicans were willing to say, okay, well, let's at least have a conversation, because we've been talking about this for a long time. And so the House version that originally came up that the governor proposed, I want to be absolutely clear. I did not like it. None of us liked it. In fact, you couldn't find a single person who liked it. But it was the first vehicle that came up. And what that would have done was gotten rid of the 17.5 cents gas tax that we pay per gallon, which would have been a horrible idea, because that was a user fee that everybody who uses a road, including out-of-staters, will get to use. But the idea was for the governor to say, let's get rid of that tax, and in place of that, add a sales tax, an increase in the sales tax. So by the time it got to the Senate said, well, we like the idea of having the gas tax because that's a user fee. And in fact, not only should we keep the gas tax as is, we should double down and add a gas tax at the wholesale level, at the rack, which would then increase even more of a fee. And on top of that, let's keep the sales tax. So by the time that version came back to the House, when we got a chance to negotiate it, the idea of switching the gas tax from the pump, which is 17.5 cents, to the rack, which is about 3 or 3.5 cents, that came into play. And so we kept the gas tax. So I want to make it clear that we still keep the gas tax. It's a different level, but we still keep the gas tax. But the interesting thing was the tax increase that the governor was willing to swallow, 0.8%, went to being 1%. And the best part of this bill, from my perspective, is that for Northern Virginia and for Hampton Roads, we have an additional 0.7% of our sales tax, which will stay right here in Northern Virginia. And the way that would work is, for every dollar that we would receive from this new additional revenue that we're using from sales taxes, 70% will go to pay for all Northern Virginia-wide transportation problems, with certain criteria, of course. And 30% of that money will stay right here in Fairfax County. And so Fairfax County's assessment is that we should be able to see somewhere around $47 million per year guaranteed stream of money to solve our own roads, our own repairs, which is something that, as you all know, all of us in this neighborhood, we drive down some pretty bad roads here. And we will, for the first time in our recent memory, have a dedicated source of money to fix that.
Okay.
And what you have to understand in this whole process is the politics of the gas tax. Virginians in rural, south side, southwest, and in the valley, they spend an hour in transit to work, and they go 40, 50 miles. Right. We spend an hour and we go 12 miles. That's the difference. They use a lot more gasoline. They tend to have larger vehicles, trucks, things like that. So increasing the gas tax, which makes all the sense in the world to people up here, really scares them, because they have moved the gas tax into that part of the brain where food, shelter, and medical care are kept. I can't control what I put in my gas tank. I can't have taxes go up there. If you put a tax on general sales, that I can control a little bit. So that's part of the psychology, the politics, if you will, of how this bill got started with the governor eliminating the gas tax. That was a direct message to rural Virginians, I'm thinking about you, I'm concerned about you. You have needs in transportation in that part of the world. You know, we need to fix the bridges that you drive over. That's one of the big differences between Northern Virginia and the rural parts of the state, is the number of bridges that they have. And half of a bridge is paid for with maintenance funds, and half is paid for out of construction funds when you go to fix it. And whether that bridge has 10 cars a day on it or 10,000, they've got to be in good shape. So they have an interest as well, and that's why the gas tax became such an important pawn, if you will, in this game. And where we came out, I think, was just about right, and everybody was, for the most part, able to live with it.
So if I'm going from a 17.5-cent gas tax at the pump to a 3.5 cent at the rack, as you say, the sort of wholesale, am I going to see the price of gas is sitting out there at $4 and some odd cents? Is it going to go down that 14 cents?
Well, I think depending on which economic study you look at, you may or may not get some relief. But the reality is that we all know that the price of gas on a daily basis has absolutely nothing to do with the price of crude oil, has absolutely nothing to do with the overhead, has absolutely nothing to do with anything other than the fact that there's another gas station down the street that's selling it at a nickel higher or nickel lower. The price of gas that we as consumers pay is so dependent on that market at that moment that whether it's 17 cents or 11 cents or even more than that, 20 cents, of a federal tax or a state tax really shouldn't have that much of an impact. And one example of that is if you go down 95 down south side and you cross the border between Virginia and North Carolina, those two gas stations in two different states charge the exact same rate because they know that it's competition. Same thing over here with Maryland and DC and Virginia. So I don't think you'll see a big difference.
If you go to, and you viewers at home, go to gasbuddy.com, and there's a way that you can compare the average price of gasoline in North Carolina and the average price of gasoline in Virginia. And their tax is about 20 cents higher than ours. And you won't see usually a difference of more than 5 cents.
Wow.
So Virginia is a cash cow for the oil companies. The problem is that that people are so concerned about the price of gas that had we raised the gas tax at the per gallon at the pump, and we'd have raised it 10 cents, you'd have probably only seen about 4 cents. It would have been free money. But people are so worried about the price of gasoline that was an untenable solution, and that's why we came up with what we did. And the advantage too is it spreads it out into a lot of spheres. It hits everybody, but I think the message that was sent also to rural Virginia, who are struggling economically. I mean, we still have really high unemployment in these areas. Is that Northern Virginia was going to kick in extra because of the specific needs that we have to relieve congestion. And the interesting thing is myself and Delegate Jim Lemunion introduced a bill last year that was passed that the money that we spend, that VDOT spends on roads up here, has to be prioritized based on congestion relief, not whose turn it is or what road has been in the master plan the longest. And I think that's a real step forward in getting us to do the right things with the money that the citizens of Virginia are going to provide us for transportation.
Well, I saw that was one of the conditions for the local extra money, but how does that get measured? Is there some measurement that says this is congestion release? Because the smart growth people will say, if you put a road in there thinking you're relieving congestion on 28 or 29 out near Chantilly, what you're going to find is just more sprawl. So it's all short term. Is there a measure? Does the legislation say, here's how you measure congestion relief?
Well, there actually are, and this is a very complicated situation, but I'll try to explain it as simple as possible. Once on the 0.7% of the sales tax, which we in Northern Virginia will be able to receive and Hampton Roads will be able to receive, once that money is available, it will then be sent to an organization called the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. It is an organization whose job it is to make sure that they're looking at every project out there on a 6-year plan. So this isn't a willy-nilly, hey, today let's go fix this, tomorrow let's fix that. They have professionals and experts who sit there for days and days and days looking at every single need within the county, within Northern Virginia, and they come up with a 6-year plan. And so there's already a priority. Now what we've tried to do in this bill, and the bill that David was mentioning last year, was there's also an organization called the Commonwealth Transportation Board, which allocates a statewide funding. What we said was when these organizations that we've entrusted as professionals who understand transportation and traffic congestion, when they sit down, these are the criteria by which they have to allocate the money. So the first dollar goes to this, next dollar goes to that. So this isn't something that we're turning over to blindly to say, here's a bunch of money, let's go spend it. This is a very systematic way. And the best thing about this from my perspective is our county right here in Fairfax County with Chairman Sharon Bolivar's leadership, they have a Fairfax County specific set of priorities, and that will be the order by which we spend this new money that we'll be raising from our taxpayers.
So we get this extra 0.7%. So in Fairfax, I pay my extra 0.7%, but that doesn't mean Fairfax is getting it then. Fairfax is only getting that little piece of my
That's right.
0.7.
Fairfax will get about 30%. And again, this is more complicated than most consumers will need to know. But out of the 100% of the 0.7% that we would receive, 70% goes Northern Virginia wide. Because there are some, for example, you got highways and turnpikes that go all throughout the different counties. So that goes to the larger projects. Anything that's specific within the boundaries of Fairfax County will receive about 30% of the larger allocation, and that'll be done through the Fairfax County's own priority list of which program should be funded.
Yeah. And VDOT is working on a matrix of determining this that does include making transit decisions.
That's right.
To do that, because that was one of the things that when Delegate LeMunion's House version of the bill came over, I amended it to deal with some of the smart growth folks and their concerns with the Sierra Club, with the environmental community who were concerned that everything would go toward roads, and that's not the the way the bill will work. It's congestion relief, and that doesn't necessarily mean pouring asphalt.
Yeah, and just a couple more points on that. This bill, it is one of those classic examples of maybe even a Rorschach test where, depending on what your viewpoint is, if you're pro-transit, if you're pro-mass transportation, you'll see something in there that you like, but you'll also see some things in there that you don't like. If you're more for roads and highways, you'll see something in there you like, you'll see some things that you don't like. And if you're against taxes, there's probably not a lot that you like in there. But for somebody who's just pragmatic, who's stuck in traffic every single day, and as we all know in Northern Virginia, we were ranked twice now, 2 years in a row, by Texas University as the #1 transportation congestion place in the entire country. We beat Los Angeles, we beat Dallas, we beat a lot of other big cities. Today and last year, we are the #1 transportation congestion. For those that are sitting in traffic every single day, just getting frustrated, missing their children's activities and such, that cost is more than the amount that we'll be paying by extra taxes for the next year or so. So I think what we've tried to do is to say, look, let's throw something in there for every part of the problem that we need to address, including, for example, $300 million of new money for Dulles Rail, Metro Rail, so that we can maybe offset some of the toll increases that can happen there, as well as adding some new money for transit and passenger rail, as well as looking at some highway construction and new projects that need to get off the ground. And across the board, what we've tried to do is say, this isn't a be-all and end-all, but if we don't fix something now, the cost of trying to repair our roads will only double and triple over the next few years. And by 2017, if not 2018, we will literally run out of money in the state of Virginia, because the only money that we'll have is to go match the federal matching fund for the highways. So I think a lot of us thought, this isn't the perfect bill, but if we don't do something, the problem a few years down the road will be even worse. So let's just go ahead and do something. And even though there are a lot of good things, a lot of bad things in here, let's at least get something done now, so that we don't have to worry about a crisis a few years down the road.
And so the idea is we'll try and fix the little pieces that people are really perturbed about in the next year, in the next session.
Yeah, I think so. And one of those ideas is the hybrid tax. We can certainly talk about that. If I'm sure that some of your viewers will be calling in about that.
Yeah, that was a controversial piece, definitely. We are going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to finish up talking about the transportation bill, and we're going to talk about the Medicaid expansion and something called box penning that for some reason Dave Marsden's really interested in. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is firstgov.gov, where we're obsessed with getting you government information.
Brand new student loan applications on the site, baby. This calls for a celebration. Where's your uncle?
So in the end, it was either take the astronaut gig or come work here. What can I say? Duty called.
Dude, that's my cop.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's Sam's cup.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No. Sam's. No.
Just log on or email us and get what you need.
C, change of address form. That's how it's done. D, driver's license renewal.
E, emailing Social Security information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice, we'll allow it. All right, Ed. What are those?
Government surplus cars for auction.
You posted those online last time.
No, you did.
I'm posting them online this time.
For all your government information, firstgov.gov.
Oh, what have we got here? Sometimes you feel tired. You can't seem to lose those extra pounds off your midsection. And your joints hurt when you take the stairs. Well, you're getting older. But I'm happy to say that there's some simple things we can do to keep you happy and healthy for years to come. We can also lower your risk for some serious diseases the older population is often subject to. Proper nutrition is more important than ever. Your body has changed, you know. Not as many treats. A basic exercise plan, lots of walks and fresh air, and most importantly, come and see me for twice-yearly checkups to help ensure the best possible quality of life. Now, how does that sound? Good boy.
Improve the quality of life for your elderly pet. Schedule twice-yearly checkups that include preventive care and regular lab work. A message from the
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Bettina Lawton, the host of Inside Scoop, Virginia Politics, and with me is Senator Dave Marsden and Delegate Mark Keam. And we want to finish up with a point or two on the transportation bill, because the hybrid fee has generated some controversy that is sort of anti-environmental and all kinds of things like that. So tell us about it, because you told me that the wrong language ended up in this bill.
Yeah, the first time I spoke out about this bill, when I heard the governor propose this back in January, I pointed this out among other things that I thought were the problems with the bill. In short, what the governor's bill does and the bill that we passed this year does is it has a $100 fee for every alternative fuel vehicle. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, there's already an existing law, $50 fee for electric cars. So the idea of assessing a new fee for a car that's not your traditional gas or diesel car has already been in place. Most people don't know that because you don't think about the $50 that you pay as part of a larger bill. So this will be a $50 increase on top of the existing $50. But the problem here was that they added and expanded the number of cars, the vehicles that will qualify for this, including cars that use hybrid gas, as well as natural gas and any other types of technology. The theory behind this is a simple one, which is if we're going to get rid of the gas tax, not that we did, but if we were to get rid of the gas tax, then all of a sudden we don't need to worry about the gas being tied to the actual user, and so there's no need to have a fee for cars. But if we're going to keep the gas tax, there are some cars that use less gas, therefore why don't we try to equalize it by having those cars that have used less gas pay a little bit more so that everybody ends up even. What we ended up in the bill was the worst of both worlds. Because under the assumption that we weren't going to have a gas tax, we decided that we're going to get rid of this fee. But when the gas tax went back in, they put the fee back in for the alternative vehicles. But here's the rub. When they put the language back in, they used wrong language, which now penalizes all kinds of alternative vehicles, including gas-using cars like a Prius that I drive. So what we're trying to do is get the governor to clarify the language so that we're only going after those cars that don't use gasoline at all. Since there is a gas tax now for all of us who use gas, for those cars like electricity or natural gas or any other types of fuel that's not gasoline-based, they're not going to be paying a single penny in gas taxes. So is it worth us asking them to pay $50 or $100 more? That may be fair. But we ended up with a combobulation of language that's not very clear. We're going to try to fix it. If not this year, by next year, I'm going to introduce the bill myself.
Yeah. And it amounts to $10 million out of an $880 million statewide piece. And when you add the regional piece on top of that, it's $10 million out of 1.2, something like that, $1.3 billion. And I think it is something that we can fix, but it does send the wrong message. Where these are the cars that get the best gas mileage. It keeps us so that we're not dependent on foreign oil. Right. It puts less carbon in the atmosphere when you're running on the electrical portion. It sends hybrids are good, and it's the start of this technology. And I would assume that someday we won't be driving internal combustion vehicles. But while we are, this is a very, very bad tax to have. But I think it is something we can fix because it's really not that big a part. But the one thing I wanted to tell you about the transfer of the general funds, which has always been a big problem in the Virginia Senate. Right. We've objected to that because we don't want to take money from schools and put into to put it into transportation. Now, in the spirit of compromise, we knew we would have to do some. $198 million is a lot. However, one of the interesting things about this very, very complicated bill is if the Market Equity Act in Congress, which will tax internet sales the same as it does brick and mortar store sales and what have you, if that passes, then we're going to use that money for transportation. If it doesn't pass, and that's what most people are betting on, and we actually called members of our Virginia delegation on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, to say, what do you think is going to happen with this? They said, we don't think it's going to happen. So what happens in this bill is more money gets added on to the wholesale tax at the rack on gasoline and drops from $198 million in general funds to about $60 million in general funds, which is a much smaller number, and one that I think all of us, Mark
absolutely.
included, we're much more comfortable with.
Yeah.
So we're betting a little bit here that if this doesn't pass, that this will work out better for our school system, and we'll have more wholesale gas tax and less money being redirected from the general fund to transportation.
Yeah. Okay, and just to clarify, I know most people don't think about the general fund versus the transportation fund versus education funding, but the simple way to understand it is this. All of us as taxpayers in Virginia, we pay our taxes, sales, income tax, all that. All the money goes to Richmond, about $84 billion worth every 2 years, and then we allocate that money based on our priorities. And there are at least 5 major priorities that the government has to pay for. Public safety, of course, prisons and cops and all the first responders. We have to pay for education. That's under the Constitution as well as a moral right thing to do. We have to make sure that we're paying for our transportation and infrastructure, the bridges and all those things. We definitely have to pay for our health care, especially for those of us who are vulnerable, who don't have a place to turn. We want to make sure that we're paying their Medicare, Medicaid, and other sources of social services that they need. And we also need to make sure we're taking care of environmental protection, enforcement, licensing, and all the other things that go with running a business in the Commonwealth. So those are some of the main programs that we fund. The difference here is of the 4 or 5 of those programs, it comes out of the general fund. So all the money goes into one pot, in one big bank account, and we write checks from there. Transportation has its own fund. Just like a pension fund, it has its own fund that's not supposed to be touched. And yet, over the last 20-odd years, we've been dipping into it back and forth. And so now this line between transportation money and general fund money has been blurred. What we're trying to do here is to say the general fund money, which funds our education and our health care, our public safety, that should not be taken by transportation. As important as transportation is, we shouldn't borrow money from each other. So that's what we're trying to do in this bill. And so we've clarified it. The good news, as David said, is for now, for the next year and a half or so, we have to dip in quite a little bit more than we want to. But if Congress doesn't pass this other law called internet sales tax, then that amount will be reduced to only $60 million, which is manageable.
Okay. Well, let's talk, because you mentioned the Medicaid and the need to take care of people's health. And there was the Medicaid expansion. We've talked about it a lot on this show with various people, and the notion that the federal government has said if you expand who's eligible for Medicaid, that the federal government will pay 100% for the first year, and it goes down to 90% over the course of time. And Virginia has said, the governor has said, we're not going to do this. We're not going to go into this. They don't believe the government. Attorney General Cuccinelli issued some kind of opinion trying to stop it. As I understand it, there is now a commission that got set up. People say, oh, we've approved it. But as I looked at this Medicaid Innovation and Reform Commission, we didn't approve it. It's contingent on reforms being made. And there are, I guess, 5 people from the Senate and 5 people from the House appointed. Correct. So the folks who say this has been approved are a little enthusiastic and premature?
A little bit, yes. What this does is sets the stage for us doing the Medicaid expansion here in Virginia. It allows this commission to deal with the reforms that Governor McDonnell and others feel are necessary before we go full bore into this expansion. And the expansion does so much for us. Over time, it will create 30,000 healthcare jobs. And for 3 years, the federal government will pay for 100% of the expansion, and then it drops to 90% for Virginians to have to pay. But with this transportation bill, with the additional jobs we'll create in healthcare, we will be able to generate the revenue to pay for the Medicaid expansion once we have to pay for that 10% that we are going to have to pay. And I think it's unavoidable for a lot of conservatives in Virginia who just don't want to go there because this is all part of the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, if you will. But at the same time, it makes too much fiscal sense. We have conservative governors all over the state, or excuse me, all over the country, Ohio, Florida, who are saying yes. Let's do the Medicaid expansion. It makes sense for our citizens. And now Congress has to step up to the plate, do its job, and provide for the funding for these things by making the necessary budget cuts, by creating the revenues that we need here in the United States. And although they've struggled lately, I have confidence at the end of the day that they're going to get that done.
Well, I saw some criticisms in the paper, actually one of the downstate papers, Mark, that said, well, this is really never going to happen because the 5 people who've been appointed from the House of Delegates all oppose Medicaid expansion. And you need a supermajority. You need 3 out of 5, both from the Senate and from the House, in order to pass anything for the approvals out of this commission. So it's not going to happen, and we need to just recognize that it's not going to really happen. I mean, how does that work? They haven't heard anything about who the Senate got appointed, but apparently the folks coming out of the House are really conservative.
Well, let's put it this way. Medicaid Innovation Reform Commission, MERC. It's a murky situation that we have. And the problem that we have is that we were literally in a rock and a hard place. The transportation bill wasn't moving because our friends in the Senate said, you know, this isn't the priority for us. For us, it's Medicaid expansion. And the governor already kind of committed himself to saying no to anything Obamacare. Right. And so he was stuck in a position. We were all stuck in the situation of let's get something done. And we couldn't go into a special session. None of us wanted to go into special session. And so the result was a classic political compromise. And the compromise was, why don't we find some folks who are willing to work on this outside of the session so that they can continue to move the ball forward on this issue, and at the same time give them some guidance so that we will allocate the money now as a state government. We will now put the money in there, but you all have to tell us when that money is now releasable to the programs. And so that's what this MERC Commission has done. Now, you're absolutely right that politics plays into this, and of the 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat on the House side, at least 3, if not all 4 of them, have clearly said they will never expand Medicaid at any cost. But you know, one thing that we have to remember is in a few months in November, there will be an election, and there will be a new governor, whether it's Terry McAuliffe or Ken Cuccinelli. There'll be a new governor. There may be some new members of the House and members of maybe Senate as well, depending on who wins and who loses.
That's right.
And as a result of that, we will have a chance to revisit this issue in January of 2014. So between now and then, this is probably the best we could have expected. But the best thing for us as Democrats, at least, is that we went from a position of the governor saying, absolutely no way in the world I'm going to expand Medicaid, to, well, you know what, I'm more than willing to take a look at this. If all the processes are in place, I'd be happy to sign that bill. So we've moved him all the way down to this far. So I think it's a victory for me, for us anyway.
And the other part of your message clearly was there's an election coming up for the House of Delegates. The Senate has it passed this year. So the folks who are really interested in Medicaid expansion need to find out who the appointees are on this Medicaid commission, because if you want a different result, you need to do something different, and perhaps those folks who are opposed to it need to be seen light or seen the door.
Well,
one of the two.
It's new territory, and how the politics of it will play out, you know, I'm not sure, but the fact is that the kind of money that Medicaid expansion from the federal government offers Virginia, I don't care how conservative you are, I don't care how much you hate Obamacare, when you're looking at that kind of money, you've got to look long and hard before you find a reason to not accept that money, as long as those reforms are in place.
All right, well, we are not going to get to find out about Fox Penny because I can hear the music, which means we're running out of time. But we're going to get you back on and find out what that is.
We will talk about, my friends, the foxes and the difficult